Tonight on CBC Vancouver News.
This was another change and very challenging situation with the spread of Omicron.
Gyms are reopening, but not all of BC's COVID restrictions are being pulled back. Also,
we had 300 incredible women and men working on that job around the clock.
A key transportation link set to reopen, why it won't quite be business as usual. And
I just lost faith in everything. I says, you know what? I mean, let's just kick us when we're down. So basically, this is our kitchen.
Frustration grows with another setback for families trying to rebuild their flooded Abbotsford homes.
This is CBC Vancouver News.
Good evening and thanks for joining us. The BC government's evolving COVID-19 strategy has changed once again. Gyms across the province closed at the onset of Omicron in late December now have the green light to cautiously open their doors. As Balpuri reports, the latest iteration of how the province will try to fight COVID-19 is good news for some businesses and not so good for others.
The weight just lifted at BC fitness centres has nothing to do with exercise. In less than 24 hours, an indefinite closure has morphed into a gradual opening. Starting Thursday, gyms across the province will begin to operate again under new restrictions.
Our people need it, our staff need it, and I couldn't have had better news.
Occupancy limits will be based on 7 square meters per person, up to a maximum of 25 people per space. There must be enhanced ventilation. There can be no fans or heaters. Everyone must have a vaccine card and a mask.
Much of this is based on what we learned when we had our phased restart of gyms and fitness centres in 2020 and 2021. So we've learned about the measures that are important to help make sure that they can restart safely and still protect people who are most at risk.
Initial news that gyms would remain closed indefinitely had sent a ripple of panic through the fitness industry.
We haven't paid our rent in January. Our landlords have been very good about that because they know that we're really a great tenant here and they need us. But I don't think us or any other fitness center would survive February.
In many other sectors, that panic is palpable because nothing has changed. Bars and clubs will remain closed. Venue capacity will stay capped at 50%. Those restrictions will stay as is until at least another review in mid-February.
Oh, it's a huge hit. Like we have zero income, we have zero support from the government. Our whole community, whether it's produce shops, meat shops, DJs to entertainment people, everybody in the industry gets affected.
With hospitalization numbers up and Omicron transmission not slowing down, those getting a break know it's a tenuous reprieve from the restrictions.
And we just want to stay open. It's great that we're opening, but we need to remain open and we need to do everything we possibly can for that to happen.
Balpuri, CBC News, New Westminster.
The number of those treated in hospital for COVID in BC has jumped by 35 since yesterday. Hospitalizations are now at 854, doubling from last week. Patients in critical care have once again blown past 100, increasing by 13 in a matter of 24 hours. 47 are unvaccinated. 2 more people have died from the virus, and there are now 53 ongoing outbreaks in the province after adding another 9 more facilities. 6 were declared over.
We are revising our approach to outbreaks because we're finding that the measures that we put in place that have been very, very strict around COVID outbreaks in long-term care homes are causing more harm than Omicron is at the moment.
The province is not listing all long-term care homes that have tested positive. That's because BC is transitioning to declaring outbreaks on a home-by-home basis. Dr. Henry says the Omicron variant has allowed for different levels of risk. They have to balance how mild the symptoms of COVID-positive staff are with the highly vaccinated populations at care homes. And Fraser Health has opened the Surrey Bear Creek Rapid Test Distribution Centre to expand COVID-19 testing capacity. The increased number of COVID cases in the region has resulted in wait times for tests. According to Fraser Health, the addition of this appointment-only drive-through service will help ensure people will receive tests more efficiently. The center is anticipated to provide 750 rapid tests daily to people with booked appointments.
With rapid tests becoming part of the testing strategy, we felt that we could open up this site specific for rapid testing and take some of the pressure off our testing centers where they're also doing our PCR tests.
The Surrey Bear Creek Rapid Test Distribution Center is located at 13750 88th Avenue. Starting today, the center will be open from 10:30 a.m. to 5:30 p.m. 7 days a week. Well, soon teachers and other staff in school districts across the province will have to disclose their vaccination status if requested. But Joel Ballard is finding out the so-called requirement isn't as straightforward as it initially seemed.
The new provincial health order was quietly put in place this week. School districts in BC may now be required to keep a record of each employee's vaccination status, as well as proof.
This was put in place to support the MHOs who are working with their school districts across the province to make those important decisions around the need for vaccine mandates.
Now, the order doesn't necessarily mean public health will collect your vaccination status information, but that they can. The order delegates the power, giving health officers and regional authorities like Fraser Health the ability to collect it from districts, at which point employers will gather the information from their staff. It also gives the health authority the freedom to implement subsequent information collecting orders at their discretion. Dr. Henry says that data will give a better idea of which schools are at the greatest risk of an outbreak.
It's a way of us being able to prioritize and manage and support schools.
So how will this new order affect BC's largest district?
No change. Nothing. Our Board of Education has made a decision not to pursue the proof of vaccine status unless directed to by health. We have not been directed by health. We checked in with our medical health officer yesterday. There's no change.
The new order, a surprise to many.
Usually there is a discussion amongst the education partners about these kinds of orders.
But Mooring says the BC Teachers Federation was left out of the discussion. While she feels the order lacked clarity, overall her group supports it. In fact, she says it could go even further.
We wish that this order had been a vaccine mandate. It would have been just much more straightforward had it been.
Right now, she says about 95% of teachers in BC are vaccinated. Joel Ballard, CBC News, Vancouver.
Today marks 1 year since a Port Moody woman was reported missing. The case is now a homicide investigation, and iHit says finding Trina Hunt's killer remains a priority. The 48-year-old was reported missing by her husband at the beginning of last year. Months later, her body was found near Hope. In June, investigators searched Hunt's Port Moody home and her husband's parents' home in Mission. Since then, no arrests have been made and no further updates have been released.
So I'm hoping that this kind of second year going through this brings us answers, brings justice, puts people where they belong, jail, not living their lives while everybody who loved Trina is left suffering.
Hunt's family wants the investigation to move faster. They're now offering a $50,000 reward for any information leading to an arrest or charges. In what can only be described as a feat of engineering, a vital link between Metro Vancouver and BC's interior is set to reopen tomorrow. The Coquihalla Highway was destroyed at multiple points during November's catastrophic floods, but hundreds of crews working around the clock have managed to get that route up and running to regular traffic ahead of schedule. Dan Burrett joins us live with more on this. And Dan, great news for travelers, but it won't quite be business as usual, will it?
This is not the Coquihalla as we know it, Anita, according to BC's Transportation Minister. When it opens between Hope and Merritt tomorrow, the minister warns the drive between the two cities will take 45 minutes longer than normal. Expect reduced speed limits and traffic pattern changes. Some stretches will go down to one lane in each direction. And more police will be out to make sure people are driving to winter conditions. The highway was damaged in more than 20 places during last fall's brutal floods. Some bridges were torn away. It's been closed to regular traffic since mid-November, and until tomorrow, only commercial trucks and intercity buses were allowed on it. Keep in mind, all these repairs are temporary.
Some areas we're going to build back differently. than what was there before in order to account for extreme weather events. So that means that things will be engineered significantly differently than they were previously.
Again, if you plan to hit the Coquihalla starting tomorrow, be ready to slow down. And Fleming notes the state of emergency in BC in place because of the flooding is set to end at midnight, Anita.
Okay, and Dan, the government also shared updates on other damaged highways. What can you tell us about that?
Yes, let's start in the sea to sky area. We have a map for you. Take a look. Weight restrictions are going to be lifted on Highway 99 between Pemberton and Lillooet tomorrow. But other highways are going to remain closed. In the Fraser Canyon, Highway 1 has partially reopened from Kanaka Bar south of Lytton to Spence's Bridge, but the portion of highway between Kanaka Bar and Hope is still closed. And on Highway 8, connecting Merritt to Spence's Bridge, 23 separate sites are still being assessed. Parts of that highway were wiped out as well. Temporary repairs are expected to be in place so people can at least get to their homes along that stretch sometime in the spring. And Anita, all these temporary highway repairs are estimated to cost taxpayers between $170 and $220 million.
All right, Dan Burrett live for us tonight. Thank you, Dan. And during those floods in November, we know many houses were also hit hard. Now those homeowners are facing another hurdle. They've asked their banks for loans to help rebuild. But as Leanne Young tells us, many along Abbotsford's Sumas Prairie are simply being denied.
As floodwaters rushed into Marcel Ackerman's home in the Sumas Prairie, he knew the road to rebuilding would be murky. With no insurance and government funds months away, he turned to his bank, RBC, for a loan.
Basically was denied 5 weeks into it altogether. They just said they're not going to lend us anything. They need to assess the property value out here and whatnot, and they can't do that, so they're not lending any money.
The family of 3 own their home, 2 barns they use for their welding business, and 20 hectares of fertile farmland worth millions. It made little sense.
I just lost faith in everything. I says, you know what, I mean, let's just kick us when we're down.
Ackerman says RBC told him they couldn't get appraisers into the flood area. 2 other Abbotsford families who banked with other financial institutions were given similar reasons when their loans were being denied. But the organization representing appraisers says they take direction from the banks.
We're not the drivers of this. We're always working under a terms of reference that's provided to us.
Lindsay Kay says CIBC gave her the runaround for weeks. Finally, her mortgage broker told her banks had suspended all appraisals in the area. They had concerns about soil contaminants and how the floods would affect her home's value in future.
It's the sort of the in-your-face realization that this is potentially a bad investment.
Tamsin Lyle researches flood risk. Immediately after a flood, she says house prices in hazard zones tend to drop dramatically. But with record home sales in the Fraser Valley the past year, appraisers say that might not last.
In my experience in 30 years, the values seem to kind of pause, and then 3, 6, 12 months later, the markets becomes cautiously active again.
That's what Ackerman and other families in the area are counting on.
When you have assets and they're not going to let you borrow against them, I mean, land is land, water's gone.
No one was available for an interview from any of the banks or credit unions in question. But in a statement, RBC says they are continuing to look at viable options to help. CIBC says it recognizes industry-wide delays and are working as quickly as possible. Just a few hours after our story was published online this morning, Lindsay Kay tells me she got a call from an appraiser sent from CIBC willing to move forward on her application. The others are still hoping for the same. Leanne Young, CBC News, Vancouver.
Residents of the Ucluelet First Nation are under a state of emergency and without drinking water tonight after a barge crashed into an underwater line affecting the community's water supply.
I mean, when we can't do without water, I mean, it's just another, shows you how vulnerable, a community is without that access.
A supply truck will be hauling water from the district and delivering it to homes in the First Nation community. Residents are advised not to drink, cook, shower, or even use the water for pets until further notice. Welcoming meteorologist Johanna Wagstaffe now. And Joe, I was all pumped, excited for the end of the week sunshine, but I hear that I should be holding back my excitement and my joy.
I just think we should all be tempering our expectations, myself included. I know I was a little worried about a little something called Fog Hoover, and I think that just might be our story Friday into the weekend instead of that glorious sunshine that so many of us are seeing on our weather icon. Let me start you off with what's going on right now. It's been patchy fog, drizzle for the better part of the week, and that's what we've got going on for a couple more days. 6 right now with your YVR. Basically being our temperature story since Monday, 8 down towards Victoria, maybe dropping another degree or 2 in through Metro Vancouver, and maybe raising a degree or 2 as we head into Wednesday. Latest look at the satellite and radar. It's really just patchy out there. You saw the pictures from Ucluelet, very foggy looking. We'll get used to that fog again across the island tomorrow, and patchy fog for the coast of Metro Vancouver. One thing we'll watch for tomorrow afternoon is steadier, the light rain moving in. Basically all the rain that we've seen in the past couple of days in Metro Vancouver. The diameter has been less than 1 millimeter, so definitely of the drizzle variety. We'll see those diameters ramp up in size, but nothing to write home about. Just some more rain for Wednesday overnight into Thursday. And then, Anita, I'll break down the chances of Fog Hoover versus Bluebird Sky coming up in a bit.
I'm a little torn because I love a good fog, especially in the morning.
Yeah,
so.
It's moody, right? Okay,
yeah.
There's some silver linings there.
Thanks, Joe.
You're welcome.
The weather update is brought to you by Sophia Financial Group of Raymond James Limited. Register now for our free Cash Flow Connection series at sophiaevents.ca.
Well, it's a new initiative that's aiming to cut back on single-use plastics for the restaurant business. A new reusable container program for takeout is being launched in Victoria, and we got a preview of how they hope to change the model. Take a look.
The garbage cans are overfilling with a lot of garbage, and it's all from the takeout containers. The pandemic has really pushed so many restaurants and cafes into doing takeout. So a lot of takeout means a lot of takeout containers entering our landfills, so we're trying to reduce the waste. What it is if you're a customer, you'd come in and ask for the reusable container. It's a one-time purchase of $8. We put your order into the container, and then you can take the container away and use it however you like. You'd come back to any of the participating restaurants and cafes, give them the container back, and then they can package a new meal in a new sanitized container to take with your next purchase. So you see the QR code on the top, that's where you're going to take your phone, and it's going to tell you what other participating restaurants and cafes are a part of this program.
For my own business, we've gone from about 20% takeout to 100% takeout. And that's about 2,000 meals every month. That's 2,000 containers that go in the garbage, go in the compost. They're not being reused. I only want to have products and packaging that can be reused or composted. I've been doing that for a long time, and this is just one more step in that direction. We want more people to take ownership of what they are doing, how they do it, and when you own your lunchbox, you're not going to throw it in the garbage. From here, we're going to look to see what other common size containers we can bring in. I foresee cups in the future. Being a cafe, that's one of my main focuses. I would love to expand this program to utensils, cups, and other containers.
Returning to our top story now and COVID-19 restrictions in this province. While gyms are set to reopen, the rules around gatherings remain in place. Joining me now is Jim Culsey. He's the owner of Ultimate Banquet Hall in Surrey and the vice president of the BC Banquet Hall Association. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you for having me.
Jim, what's the feeling after today's announcement, knowing that banquet halls will now have to stay closed for at least another month?
Well, not very good at all. I seem it's very unfair. You know, they allowed the gyms to open up today. Everything else is open out there. You go to any restaurant, they're full capacity. All the malls are open. Your Costco's, Walmart's, everything is open except for the banquet halls. We're like the safest place to be. We're check vaccine passport at the door, ID also. Everybody's fully vaccinated. It's all friends and family. So, you know, it's a safe place to be. We have proper ventilation, and our halls are massive, and people have room to have a 6 foot apart. Everything is in protocols. We go through all the protocols and everything is in place.
So what are you being told by Adrian Dix around why you're affected?
So what they're doing is they're kind of foreseeing things. What they're looking at doing is, what they're telling me is, in the future, if we do open up the halls, the gatherings, people gather from different cities, people from Abbotsford, from Vancouver, from Surrey, from Richmond, all come together to one spot. If somebody is infected, they're going to infect everybody and they're going to take it back to their own cities, their own communities. So they're kind of stopping that from happening before it happens.
Okay, and you just mentioned before this that, rules are being followed, that people are 6 feet apart. But I've seen personally, and I've seen videos, and a lot of people have said this, that banquet halls over the last year, while the no dancing rule has been in place, along with the masking rule, that those restrictions aren't being followed in many cases. So what do you say to that?
Well, in most cases, they are being followed. People are good. It is the odd bad apple, you could say. The people are doing the dancing. We do our best to stop everything. We have, security guards. We do our best to stop people from dancing or from not wearing their masks, from, getting together at the bar or wherever, right? So all the rules are in place. The protocols are in place. It's, up to the people to also follow them too.
So if people are having a party at your venue and they decide that nobody is wearing masks and then everybody hits the dance floor, there's nothing that can really be done to stop that? Or are the halls actually trying to stop that?
We'll turn the music off, we'll turn it down. We won't play that kind of music. People will get up and dance. So we do our best from our side to prevent it. But, people are people. They sometimes don't listen.
The banquet hall business, especially in the South Asian community, is huge. We all love to throw big parties and gather with family and friends. So how much of a financial hit has this been to you and for the industry?
Oh, it's a huge hit. We have zero income. We have zero support from the government. Our whole community, whether it's produce shops, meat shops, DJs to entertainment people, everybody in the industry gets affected.
Jim Calsey is the owner of Ultimate Banquet Hall in Surrey and the vice president of the BC Banquet Hall Association. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
It's meant to make your cell phone extra zippy, but while it may speed up your everyday life, it might have ended up canceling your flight. Why the 5G rollout has been put on hold. Next. Thanks for staying with us during our commercial-free live stream. From the extreme heat this past summer, flooding rains in BC in the fall, and record cold conditions in December, we've all had our fill of wild weather. These large-scale weather events can be devastating, but what causes them? Meteorologist Christy Clemenega explains.
When you hear about a big weather event taking over the country, you probably think about something like the day after tomorrow, a planet overrun by floods, fire, and ice, and only Dennis Quaid can save us from the storm. But the truth is, large-scale weather phenomena are a little more common than you may think. It may be the cold snap that holds multiple provinces in its grip for weeks, or the heat wave that sells out air conditioners in your city. When these large-scale events happen in Canada, the polar jet stream is usually involved. That's the narrow band of fast-moving air high up in the atmosphere that divides warm air in the south from colder polar air in the north. The jet stream circles the planet like a ribbon, moving from west to east with regular waves, but sometimes, say when the polar vortex or that cold, low-pressure system from the North Pole moves south, those waves can become more pronounced. What the weather's like in your area all depends on where that jet is in relation to you. So why do those cold snaps or even heat waves feel like they last forever? Big weather systems like high pressure can get in the jet stream's way, causing a sort of traffic jam in our atmosphere. This is what we would call a blocking pattern, and when that happens, conditions are basically pinned in place for days on end. So the question is, will we see more of these large-scale events as our climate changes? Scientists agree that we can expect to see more heat waves in the future, but when it comes to cold snaps, it's a little harder to predict. As the Arctic continues to warm at its faster rate, some experts say the jet stream could become unstable, which could lead to more of those big blocking events. So while we're still figuring out exactly how the jet stream will change in the future, we likely won't see any deep freezes chasing people down or tornadoes taking over Los Angeles. That being said, more extreme storms, stronger hurricanes, and longer fire seasons, those are all things we will definitely need to be prepared for.
Mobile networks in the U.S. were planning to start rolling out 5G technology tomorrow, which they say offers faster internet service and wider coverage. But airlines have put their concerns in a letter, warning the new technology could impact safety and services. Now, at least 2 major wireless networks are postponing their rollouts near some U.S. airports. As Ashley Burke reports, the U.S. president says the move avoids potentially devastating disruptions.
Airlines are warning of catastrophic disruption and a completely avoidable economic calamity. Delta, United, American Airlines, and others say that thousands of planes may need to be delayed, diverted, or grounded indefinitely, and estimate it could impact up to 100,000 passengers a day. The letter urges the government to ban 5G from 2 miles of an airport, that's about 3 kilometers, and wrote, quote, immediate intervention is needed to avoid significant operational disruption to air passengers, shippers, supply chain, and delivery of needed medical supplies, including vaccine distribution. The airline's concern is that Verizon and AT&T's 5G technology could interfere with planes' navigation tools that tell pilots how close they are to the ground during bad weather. Now, the wireless industry has accused the aviation sector of fear-mongering and has promised to reduce the signal strength, especially on cell towers near airports. AT&T announced today that it will hold off from turning on 5G at a limited number of towers near airports for now, and wrote in a statement that it's frustrated by the Federal Aviation Administration's inability to do what nearly 40 countries have done, which is to safely deploy 5G technology without disrupting aviation services, and we urge it to do so in a timely manner. The White House says discussions are ongoing to reach a solution.
Our objective is, of course, to reach a solution around 5G deployment that maintains the highest level of safety while minimizing disruptions to passenger travel. That's what we're working towards.
Meanwhile, Canadian authorities banned 5G near airports this fall until more research is done. Transport Canada also issued a directive to help Canadian pilots navigate if they need to land at a U.S. airport with 5G nearby and there are issues. The Transport Minister's office says that it will be watching to see if there ends up being any impact on the supply chain and Canadian travelers. Ashley Burke, CBC News, Washington.
And Canada's Foreign Minister Mélanie Joly says Ottawa stands shoulder to shoulder with Ukraine as the Eastern European nation deals with the threat of a possible Russian invasion.
There is only one viable path. Russia needs to de-escalate and needs to engage in meaningful dialogue.
Russia has denied any plans to invade, but has positioned about 100,000 troops near its border with Ukraine. Joly, who is in the Ukrainian capital, says her visit is meant to show Canada's unwavering solidarity to the country during the ongoing crisis. An assignment about immigration at a St. John's Junior High School is raising concerns tonight. Anti-racism advocates and others saying the wording in 2011 in a textbook is xenophobic. As Meg Roberts reports, the province is now reviewing the material.
It's an assignment that Professor Dolores Mulling says should have never been allowed in the curriculum in the first place.
It's xenophobic and it's racist.
The junior high school assignment asks students to write down reasons why immigrants and refugees should and should not be allowed into the country. It's from an 11-year-old textbook that challenges students to debate growing immigration numbers. The textbook provides a list of reasons why newcomers should be allowed into the country, examples that said migrants can take jobs away from resident Canadians, that some immigrants draw on social welfare programs, and that increasing immigration changes the ethnic makeup of the country, enhancing racial tensions.
We're asking students to not only read, but ingest and think about how to discriminate and stereotype against different groups of people that are coming into Canada. Very disappointed.
The assignment was taken from a textbook called Canadian Identity, published in 2011 by Nelson Education Limited, made specially for the Newfoundland and Labrador Social Studies curriculum. The education minister said he reviewed the assignment and textbook and believes the social studies curriculum needs a refresh, which includes looking into removing the textbook.
We want people to feel welcome and,
newcomers, especially students in our schools, we don't want them sitting there feeling as though they may or may not belong in the classroom. While we encourage educators and students to take on topics and debate that allow for the growth in areas such as critical thinking, we need to ensure that it is done with sensitivity, that it is done with respect, that it is socially conscious and up to date.
The Anti-Racism Coalition of Newfoundland and Labrador is wondering why it took more than 10 years to review the textbook.
Education system, especially the K-12 system, fuels the knowledge, the analysis, the understanding between ourselves. It fuels connections.
The coalition is asking the government to use an anti-racist framework to develop that new curriculum, which would provide an avenue for parents, teachers, and students to make complaints about course material. It also wants to see the government hire a committee of diverse individuals that could provide anti-racism training to those who are working on the curriculum, as well as teachers. Meg Roberts, CBC News, St. John's.
Quebec is calling on public servants to help in hospitals to make up for staffing shortages as COVID-19 patients overwhelm the health system. As Rowan Kennedy reports, they're being asked to take over non-medical tasks normally performed by nurses.
The Quebec Healthcare Workers Union says it will relieve pressure off of nurses, but they're concerned how the new measure will be applied.
We have to integrate them. They have to complement the healthcare workers, not supplement them.
Premier Legault said thousands of new healthcare workers are being trained, but until then he hopes civil servants will fill gaps in staffing. The Premier explained that it would be on a voluntary basis on Tout le monde en parle.
Take charge of the nurses' administrative responsibilities so the nurses can concentrate on patients.
The province says the new staff will work as administrative aides and attend to patients' basic needs, such as serving food and drinks. They'll work in long-term care homes, readaptation centers, and sites built to help COVID overflow. The measure will be temporary, and those who do volunteer will get benefits offered to healthcare workers. But the union representing the civil servants in Quebec says they only got 2 days' notice before the new measure was announced. The head of the SFPQ says 30 to 35% of their members are essential and cannot leave their workplace.
We need some people now in the public services. We don't have them. We don't have enough people right now to work and to be able to respond to all the demands of the people of Quebec.
Last time, 500 civil servants were deployed to work in the healthcare field, but now the province is hoping more than 2,000 people will sign up. Rowan Kennedy, CBC News, Montreal.
China's COVID safety protocols are strict and sweeping ahead of the Beijing Olympics. CBC has learned that testing will be so stringent it could prevent some Canadian athletes from competing. Ellen Morrow tells us that that includes those previously cleared of the virus.
The final touches for Beijing 2022. Olympic rings on the ice as China puts a ring around the games. To keep COVID out, CBC has learned China will use extra sensitive PCR testing, more sensitive than what's commonly used in Canada and by major sports leagues. Some experts say it's too sensitive.
You're going to pick up a lot of people that are probably not infectious.
PCR tests come down to the so-called CT or cycle threshold value. Most places in Canada use a CT value of 35. But for the Olympics, PCR tests will have a CT value of 40, making them more able to pick up remnants of the virus. The concern is athletes who recovered from COVID weeks, even months prior, may still test positive when they arrive and be unable to compete.
People that have recovered from COVID-19, they're all going to identify as positive, or some of them will identify as positive in a foreign country going through isolation protocols. But are they transmissible? The answer is no.
Yeah, Cassie! A positive COVID test was already the fear hanging over Canada's athletes desperate to perform.
My plan for the next few weeks is just to stick to being at home and being at the rink.
Right now, the plan that we have is to really get us the best chance of going over to Beijing and having a negative COVID test. So that's priority number one, because without that test, we can't even compete.
China has been fierce in its fight against Omicron, locking down entire cities and mass testing tens of millions of residents. The test for the country itself will be to keep the Olympics safe.
China has always been very careful, and they've very dense populations.
That and protecting its reputation may be behind the intense testing regimen for the Games, says this virologist.
I think they want to keep an image of making sure that the Olympics are being done in a safe environment.
Now athletes wait and hope the measure doesn't crush their Olympic dreams.
The Coquihalla may be reopening to all traffic tomorrow, but truckers have a warning. Prepare for the worst. Why they say things are terrible on BC's highways next.
A special ceremony will be held tonight at the NHL AllStar game in Vancouver. It's a ceremony to honor Willie O'Ree. The left-winger from New Brunswick only scored 4 goals in his short career, but as Ian Hanamansing explains, his legacy lives on.
How you doing? Good. He is one of the pioneers of hockey, but don't be surprised if you don't recognize him. For more than 30 years, Willie O'Ree was not much more than a footnote in hockey's history. But look at him now.
What's it like getting this kind of recognition now?
Oh, it really feels great. It really does.
O'Ree was a rarity in so many ways. He grew up in Fredericton, one of the very few players from New Brunswick to make it to the NHL. He could only see with one eye after getting hit with a puck in junior hockey. And of course, when he stepped on the ice on January 18th, 1958, he became the first black player in the NHL. O'Ree said he yearned for race not to be an issue, but he says about a third of the players in the league never let him forget.
When I broke in, this went on every game. I mean, there were racial remarks to me every game, and there was nothing done about it. And I just felt, hey, I'm out here to do a job. Let these guys, if these guys want to, lower themselves and use racial remarks. I think possibly they were possibly trying to get my goat to taunt me to see if I would drop the gloves and go with them or whatever.
After virtually ignoring him for decades, all of a sudden the NHL has discovered Willie O'Ree and his story, hoping his charm and his newfound stardom will impress and inspire young hockey players. What kind of appeal does he have for you?
Well, I just have respect for anyone who plays hockey and the whole National Hockey League in general, and I think being the first black player, that's a big step and a good thing for everybody.
This weekend, the NHL announced it's created a brand new job for Willie O'Ree to try to encourage kids from diverse ethnic backgrounds to get involved in hockey in Canada and the United States. This comes just a few months after 2 NHL players received stiff suspensions from the league for hurling racial epithets at black players. What a difference 40 years makes. Back then, Willie O'Ree sometimes felt like he was all alone, enduring endless racial insults from players on the ice and people in the stands. He never imagined it would end up like this. Ian Hanamansing, CBC News, Vancouver.
Here are some of the stories we're following tonight on CBC Vancouver News. Gyms and fitness centres across BC will be allowed to start gradually reopening as of January 20th. Other restrictions, including the ban on gatherings like weddings and funerals, is being extended until February 16th at least. Bars, nightclubs, and lounges must also stay closed.
Basically was denied 5 weeks into it altogether. They just said they're not going to lend us anything. They need to assess the property value out here, and whatnot, and they can't do that, so they're not lending any money.
Several families living in Abbotsford's Sumas Prairie area have been denied bank loans they were counting on to help rebuild their damaged homes after November's devastating floods. A number of affected homeowners have been told by their banks they've been declined or put on hold with no clear timeline because they can't get their properties appraised. And it's good news for drivers in BC. The Coquihalla Highway will reopen back up tomorrow to regular traffic after being seriously damaged during those November storms. For the past month, only essential traffic has been allowed to use this key route between Vancouver and the rest of Canada. But as Renee Filipponi reports, there are still big issues on roads across the province struggling with severe weather.
A moment to pray before hitting BC highways. It's become a ritual for some truck drivers.
It's not only that we are scared, it's our families that they are scared too. Our kids come and hug us, and we can see in their eyes the answer they want. Will you be back?
Along with snow and ice, Vijaydeep Singh Sahasi says conditions on the roads have severely deteriorated.
There are the potholes that are so big that if the truck hits them, obviously we lose the balance. You know, it scares us down, and it's a danger for the other users of the road as well.
Some of his colleagues have died.
If the road conditions don't improve, so many people would want to park their trucks.
These are the highways truckers rely on every day. Heavily damaged by floods and freezing temperatures in the past 3 months. The province says repairing them is a top priority.
Wet conditions on the roadbed that then freezes and cracks, and we know that those repairs are really important. And we have companies and firms and supplies procured to be able to do that as quickly as possible.
But it's not just major highways that are crumbling. Potholes have been wreaking havoc for weeks across the province.
It can get quite big, and then as a result, some people may pop a tire or do rim damage to their vehicle.
To prevent that, crews in Burnaby have been working tirelessly to patch up holes.
With all the water and the rain we've had and all the snow and the melting and then all the freeze-thaw going on we've had, it's definitely taken a toll on our roads this year.
Just more damage to fix following months of weather that has so much of the province still in recovery mode. Renee Filipponi, CBC News, Vancouver.
There are still many questions with few answers. How has the island nation of Tonga fared after a massive under-ocean earthquake and the rescue effort to reach islands cut off? That's next. And at 6:42, a live look tonight at Kingston, Ontario, where they are still digging out after a massive snowstorm. Lots of precipitation here, though, on the south coast of BC, but coming in the form of rain. Johanna has all the details on how much and how long next.
In the year 2050, how will BC look? From agriculture to cities, how will climate change life? Don't miss 2050, Degrees of Change, a CBC Vancouver original podcast, now available.
To Tonga now, where officials are confirming at least 3 people have died after Saturday's volcanic eruption, which also triggered a tsunami. As freelance reporter Stephanie Skenderis explains, we are finally getting a better sense of the situation on the ground.
Tonga's government has confirmed all of the houses on Mango Island have been destroyed, and on another island, only 2 houses are left. The extent of this devastation can be seen in new images from surveillance flights sent by Australia and New Zealand that show a thick layer of ash covering Tonga's port, roads, buildings, and crucially, its airport runway, making it impossible for planes bearing supplies to land. Evacuations on 3 of Tonga's islands have begun, and the Tongan Navy is sending health teams and water, food, and tents. But communication is a huge challenge. Tonga's main undersea connection cable has been cut, leaving members of Tongan communities in countries like Australia desperately trying to find out if their family members are okay.
The worst fear is always that you're not going to see the people that you love again. The worst fear is the suffering of other people. That's hard to cope with, probably even more than your own suffering.
Until that airport runway is clear, Australia and New Zealand will send Navy ships to help their neighbour. Australia's HMAS Adelaide is loaded with engineering and medical supplies and helicopters to help with distribution, but it is expected to take 5 days to reach Tonga from Brisbane. Australia and New Zealand are also coordinating with the US, France, and other countries to help Tonga recover. Stephanie Skenderis for CBC News, Melbourne.
Meteorologist Johanna Wagstaffe is back now with the forecast. And Joe, while things are fairly normal in the Lower Mainland right now, not so for other parts of BC, is it?
Anita, we had a 23-degree temperature drop in Prince George overnight. Yeah, that's the Arctic air mass, and it's quite the contrast when you look at the temperatures across the province. In fact, across the country, you can really see where that Arctic air mass is moving. The areas in dark blue and pink, that's that Arctic air, and you can see it encroaching on northern and central BC. Williams Lake is about as far south as that Arctic air goes. We actually have winter storm warnings in place for Kitimat, Terrace, Stewart, 20 to 30 centimeters tomorrow. A little bit of a clipper system developed on the lee side of the Rockies yesterday, bringing 10 to 15 centimeters through southern Alberta, Saskatchewan, Manitoba, and that's actually pushing into southern Ontario tonight. That's on top of the 50 centimeters, of course, that Torontonians are still digging out of. So seeing some winter weather almost from coast to coast. Getting through our relatively mild and showery weather, we do have an extra pulse of moisture coming basically tomorrow afternoon. It's drizzle and fog to start, and then we'll see that steadier rain, as I mentioned earlier, pick up in intensity. I mean, we're talking maybe 10 to 20 millimeters from Wednesday afternoon through to Thursday afternoon. So not a significant event by any means, but it's probably the most rain we've seen this week. Mountains looking to get 40 to 60 millimeters of rain. Taking you through the rest of the province, -4 is your high in through Prince George tomorrow, but wind chills will still hover around -12. Same story in through Williams Lake. Kelowna look for 40-kilometer-per-hour gusts again through the valley. Cranbrook at a -3, and Prince Rupert 20 to 30 millimeters for you with highs to 6. So here's that general westerly flow that's moving in, but notice that bigger system that hits the coast, really hammering Haida Gwaii with 80-kilometer-per-hour winds, and then spreading that snow inland to places like Terrace and Stewart. And that's the system that we catch the tail end of, bringing some steadier rain tomorrow afternoon into Thursday. After that, we get into a very changed forecast. Now, I was a little worried anytime we get big high pressure systems move in this time of the year and we have snow on the ground. We've had recent precipitation. There is a chance of an inversion. We do see foggy stretches in fall and winter, and it is looking more likely that instead of a sunny stretch Friday through the weekend, we might end up a bit socked in. Now, I'll have a better gauge of that tomorrow. Better chance of seeing the sun Thursday. We'll have increasing fog as that inversion really builds in. But Anita, if you can get to the top of the mountains, say Saturday or Sunday, that's where the sun is and the teen temperatures. But yeah, not the spring-like forecast we were kind of all hoping for.
No. And is that Friday, Saturday, Sunday? Was that a fog icon?
It was, yes. It was a very moody veil of uncertainty.
I like it. It definitely shows the uncertainty. Thanks, Jo.
Yep, you're welcome.
A battle to be named BC's Best Song. Will it be Home for a Rest or Call Me Maybe? Two very different tunes. Justin McElroy sings the winning song from the rafters next.
It's really exciting for me and my family. It was kind of a unique position to be in, to be taking over a business, you know, that's loved by so many. Movies sort of transport you, you know, to another place, another time, and we wanted that feeling of being transported to somewhere else to happen the moment you walk through the doors. I wanted to feel familiar, like a place they've always known, but with a few upgrades to it. So this is a completely new area that we have turned the sidebar. We decided to expand to have a bar, a licensed bar, so that patrons can show up, congregate a bit earlier, have a drink, have some food from the cafe or indeed the food truck. Really wanting it to be a place that was sort of like a community hub. So we focused on the cafe and upgrading sort of like the concession and making it more of an all-day hub for people to come to. This will lead on to the patio here. And the other reason we did it was because it's really tough for single-screen cinemas to survive solely on ticket sales. And we thought creating this sort of environment, creating a bit more of an experience around the movie would be a good way to kind of help increase that revenue so that a place like this can survive and go on to do even bigger things. But this is a theatre that people know and love. One area we weren't able to touch was the theatre itself, because we've got great ideas for that, but our budget basically wouldn't stretch to doing all of it in one go, so we focused on the things that help create more of an experience around the movies, and there'll be some things that happen later. We've been actually thinking about some of these ideas for years as a kind of dream. Oh, you know, if we own the plaza, this is what we do. So when it actually came up in the midst of a pandemic, we were like, is anyone else going to bid for this? And we'd actually had our plan of what we wanted to do to go. So it was really great to be able to do it. There's some great artwork by some local artists. This is a huge one that kind of represents part of my background. So I'm West African as well as British. I moved to Calgary because of my husband, who's a Calgarian. And this has, in a way, helped me embed myself within the city. It's sort of, as we've been growing the plaza, I feel like I've been putting down roots as well. In doing this place, we've come across people who said this was the first place they saw a film, so people got married here, and we loved its historic standing in the local community, and we hope that with these upgrades, it makes the plaza survive and people can continue to build memories here like they did before.
Hi, I'm Amy Bell, and here's what's in your CBC Vancouver inbox.
Enjoy CBC Radio 1 while you're on the go with the free CBC Listen app. Get live access to your favorite CBC radio programs, like the early edition with Stephen Quinn. Missed your morning show? You can also listen to Radio 1 programs on demand and browse CBC Music playlists, podcasts, and more. It's love at first listen. Download the free CBC Listen app today.
All right, BC's Best Song has been crowned. Over the last 10 days, our Justin McElroy has been asking people to vote on the BC Song bracket, the competition pitting the province's best songs against each other. But in the end, there can only be one winner. So let's find out who that is. Justin McElroy is back. Justin, it was a wide field to begin with, but in the end, it came down to a real nail-biter. So?
Yeah, over 700 nominations, more than 100,000 votes, 10 days of voting. But in the end, the song for British Columbia, the winner of the bracket is... You have to excuse me, I'm not at my best. I've been gone for a week, I've been drunk since I left. And these so-called vacations will soon be my death. I'm so sick from the drink, I need home for a rest. Yeah, that's Home for a Rest, Spirit of the West's 1990 classic, played in bars and pubs and weddings all across this province, and plenty in the rest of the country too, winning in the end. It was a close matchup, defeating Call Me Maybe by Carly Rae Jepsen, an international hit, but not enough to win this competition. It was just 2% or so the overall victory for Home for a Rest in the end. And there you have it. That is, according to the people on the internet, which is always very official, British Columbia's most iconic song.
Very official indeed. I can't say I'm disappointed in this result. So what was the response from everyone else to the final matchup?
Yeah, it ended up being sort of, as you might expect, a generational matchup, given that it was the winner of the classic bracket versus the winner of the modern bracket. In the end, there were a lot of Carly Rae fans out there, a lot of people who love Call Me Maybe. In fact, at one point, they did take the lead in this competition at about noon. But Home for a Rest, so beloved in British Columbia. And, you know, it might say something that lots of people are hoping sooner or later we can all get on the dance floor at one point and maybe tap out to that flute and fiddle and enjoy a jig to that classic BC song.
A lot of good memories doing that for sure. Finally, Justin, what does this winner say about BC?
Oh, it's hard to say. You know, I mean, some people said that there should have been more songs included about BC geography or towns, but ultimately, songs that really resonate for people are the type that, you know, you listen maybe to at a small concert when they're just starting out, and then you hear them on the radio when they're getting bigger, and then they're back for a hometown concert at the Commodore. And it's that linkage throughout years and years that really builds up that nostalgia. And maybe that's why Home for a Rest won out. Ultimately, it just has 30 years of basically memories to create for British Columbians. Call Me Maybe only has 10. That could have been it, but ultimately what it says is people here love their music and they love their memories.
Absolutely. Justin McElroy, thank you.
Thanks, Anita.
There you have it. No Sarah, no Summer of '69, or my personal favorite. Here for a good time, not a long time. But hey, congrats to Spirit of the West. That's it for CBC Vancouver News tonight. Thank you for watching.